Welcome back to another edition of the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. My name is Andy Barch. As always, I am joined alongside Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle, Telegram, Medina Gazette, and of course, BrownsZone.com, Scott Petrak. Scott's fresh off his weekend visit to his alma mater, although things didn't go so well, did they, down there at Evanston?
No, they did not. I'd rather not talk about it, but it was good to get back. The campus still is gorgeous. That new football facility or athletic facilities. Unbelievable, and I got to reconnect with 3 college buddies, so that was great.
Good stuff. Well, of course, we want to get into what the Browns have been up to during the bye week. No shortage of storylines, that's for sure, as the Browns prepare for this coming Sunday's game against the New England Patriots, who still look unbeatable after thrashing the New York Jets on Monday Night Football. Well, Scott, we mentioned no shortage of storylines, and I want to begin with something that kind of surfaced shortly after the loss last week to the Seattle Seahawks. You know, John Clayton was the one that put this report out there that apparently there were discussions about potentially firing Freddie Kitchens after that loss against the Seattle Seahawks. Not sure how much of that you're buying, but sure would be interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. I never got that sense being around the Browns. I never felt it was kind of at a critical mass point. And then we talked to John Dorsey, the GM, last week, and did nothing but stand behind Freddie and compliment his play calling and game planning, which we could argue about that for a while. But I just never got that sense. I don't think that was in danger of happening. Obviously, it didn't happen because they did lose to Seattle and blew a 14-point lead. John's a good reporter. I don't know if he got some bad info. I don't know if some comments he made on the radio got misconstrued because I actually haven't heard the recording to see, how strong he was about it. But I think it's a non-story. I don't think Freddie's going anywhere anytime soon, at least for this season and at least until stuff gets much worse.
And for now, I think we can all look at this and think, look, if that was going to be the case, and I've thought this ever since this report surfaced, if you were going to fire the guy 5 or 6 games into the season, then you have to call into question why you would have hired him to begin with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think outsiders can, right? We can say, hey, he's a first-time head coach and no experience and is only coordinator for 8 games at the end of last year. But there was obviously a strong enough feeling inside the organization, whether it's owner Jimmy Haslam, I think John Dorsey, he was his guy the entire time. So you're right. And you're right. There would have to be something dramatic for it to change, for that support to erode. And I just haven't seen that around the building. I don't think Freddie's done anything egregious. I mean, he can pick at certain things, but nothing that's quote-unquote a fireable offense. Now we've seen coaches get fired after a year, right? It happens. Rob Chudzinski here. We've seen other examples across the league. But that would be, not only would it be a drastic move, I think it would call into question John Dorsey's standing within the organization, at least from the outside, because he's the guy that made that hire. So as much as you could say, well, I'm blaming him and he didn't get the job done, it's also a reflection on you, if you're John Dorsey, that you in fact hired this guy with your first chance to really hire a coach, or your first chance to hire a coach with this organization. So, yeah, like you said, I just don't see it going that way. And if they go 5-11, we can have this discussion again, right? If they continue to have blowout losses. I mean, John Dorsey dismissed that. He said that happens in the league. It's a 16-week league. Yes, some blowouts happen. I think he dismissed it too quickly. But if we continue to see those pile up, especially against a softer schedule on the back end, then we can have a more serious conversation about that.
And look, there's plenty of time, I think, for the Browns to make up some ground, no doubt about that. But I think seeing what happened in Seattle to the Seahawks by the Ravens has some Browns fans at least a little bit concerned, because now the Browns are 2.5 games back, and the Ravens, at least at this point, to some people look like they're running away with this division. Now, 2.5 games can certainly be made up, and I think we'll certainly learn a lot about this team over the next couple of weeks, but how alarming do you think it is that they're 2.5 games back at this point?
Yeah, it's newsworthy. And the Browns, I talked to some players about it on Monday, and, they wanted to kind of downplay it. We don't start looking at the standings until later in the year, and we got him again, and there's a lot of time left. And I understand that, and that's probably the proper approach to have if you, are in that locker room and playing. You can't get obsessed with the fact that you're 2.5 games behind. Having said that, when you look at the schedule and you play that schedule game, I think you expected Baltimore to go to Seattle and lose. And Seattle came to Cleveland and won. So that's a big swing. We have 14-point swings in games. That's a 2-game swing in the standings. So I think it is significant. To me, the biggest point is when the Browns went into Baltimore and beat them in whatever that was, week 4, and got to 2-2, and all of a sudden they had the advantage in the division because they held the tiebreaker and they were tied. I think there's a sense that the Baltimore team wasn't that good. And the Browns might be able to win this division with 9 wins or 8 wins or whatever, right? I've seen that written and talked about. And I never bought into that because I like John Harbaugh a lot as a coach, and I respect Lamar Jackson and just, well, whatever you want to say about him as a passer, the versatility he has and the unique qualities about him make him tough to defend. And we saw that against Seattle. He just kept drives alive, however he wanted to do on third downs. So my point is I never expected Baltimore to crumble. I expected Baltimore to have a solid season, which means the Browns have to match that. So if the Browns are going to have a chance to win the AFC North, I think they need to get to 10 wins because I think Baltimore is going to get to 9 wins at least. So this doesn't mean the Browns can't get there, but it means that 2-4 means you got to go 8-2, right? And if you lose Sunday at New England, it means you got to go 8-1. And that's asking a lot, especially for a team that conceivably could be 2-5 after Sunday. So I think those are the things you have to take into consideration. Yes, the Ravens' schedule, I believe, gets harder, but if they go on the road and win in Seattle, then who's to say they can't beat another really good team? And, when you look at how the Browns can get to 10-6, we've talked about how the schedule gets easier, and it does. They're going to need to sweep the division. I think they need to sweep Cincinnati, sweep Pittsburgh. They haven't played either team yet, and then beat Baltimore in week 16 in Cleveland. That gets you 6 wins. You have the Jets win, so you got 7, and then you got to figure out a way to get 3. And you got to get 3 out of Arizona, Buffalo, Denver, and New England, right? If I'm doing my schedule correctly. And that's asking a lot. Buffalo's playing well. Denver's playing better. Arizona's playing better with their number 1 pick quarterback, Kyler Murray. So I think for all the people that assumed the Browns are going to go on a 7-game winning streak, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying it's not as automatic in my mind that it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
And we have to take into consideration, too, who's going to be in place to help them get where they would like to go. And one of the names that popped up quite a bit in our first few podcasts was Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
Better, worse, and different, you make the call, but his name constantly popped up, and he was back at practice yesterday. Anything really stand out about him in that first practice session?
Well, you know what? The fact that he was there, right? I know the team knew he was going to be there, but we didn't know he was going to be there until we show up at practice Monday. The NFL plays loosey-goosey with their suspension rules and when a guy's allowed to be around the team, when he's not, when he's allowed to practice. It really feels like they make stuff up as they go. Having said that, he's back on the field. Looked good. I mean, he reminded me of when I first saw him in the spring, right? I probably saw him in April for the first time practicing. And you think, man, this is a guy that looks like he led the league in rushing, right? I'm not just saying he's back to where he was 2 years ago. He hasn't played football in almost a full year now, or in a real regular season game. But there's just something about him. There's big-time players stand out when you look at him. And even though it was a small glance yesterday, I think that applies. And then, being in my job, I want to flash forward. Well, what's it going to mean when he comes back? What does that mean for Nick Chubb? What's it mean for the offense? The Browns have a couple weeks to figure that out. But my first thought is it cannot mean fewer carries for Nick Chubb because he's been by far the best player on this team. But all of a sudden, you probably have 2 top 10 backs in the league. And I'm not sure I would have put Nick Chubb in that group before the season started. I certainly am now. And I think Kareem Hunt deserved to be in that spot for the season and a half that he started his career with the Chiefs before they cut him, before the video, before the suspension. So if you have 2 top 10 talents at running back, what do you do? Do you run the ball a ton? Do you use Kareem Hunt as a slot receiver, as a wide receiver? They couldn't get Odell Beckham Jr. the ball for a long time. How are you going to incorporate another big-time piece? So obviously you want as many great players as you can have, but I have questions about how they will make it work, especially given how great Nick Chubb has looked to this point.
Again, we've got you locked into the BrownsZone.com zone coverage podcast with Scott Petrak. Well, I think deal or no deal, that seems to dominate a lot of conversations surrounding the Browns, at least over the last few days. We had a lot of rumors surfacing about a week ago, shortly after our last podcast, about the Browns potentially being involved in a deal to get Trent Williams. And, you still hear a lot of those whispers, but it seems like a good chunk of that has gone away. Do you think they're any closer to making a deal or maybe adding another piece on that offensive line?
I don't. And the reason I say that is I just don't think Washington is going to budge and trade Trent Williams. And that's their stance. And the national reporters that know Washington better than I do keep getting the same answer. John Dorsey told us that he's had conversations with Bruce Allen, his counterpart with Washington. Was not shy, said takes two to tango, meaning they need Washington to be agreeable to get a deal done. I think he's trying to put some kind of pressure on Bruce Allen, but it doesn't look like it's going to have the desired effect. And it's interesting because we know John Dorsey loves to make moves. And we know that he's not satisfied with the O-line. He was clear on that in this news conference last week, whether that's trying to apply pressure to Robinson and Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard and Eric Kush, whether that's just how he honestly feels. He wasn't shy. He didn't criticize Baker, didn't criticize Freddie Kitchens, but criticized the O-line. So with all that in mind, I'm sure that he's trying to upgrade, and his number one priority, his number one desire would be Trent Williams. But if that doesn't happen, I'm just not sure how many pieces are out there for him to significantly upgrade this offensive line at this point in the season. So if I were going to bet, I would bet that John Dorsey makes a move before the trade deadline, which is a week from today, just because I think that's his personality. I would not think it would be a frontline guy, a guy that can step in and play left tackle or can step in and play X position. And the fact is, outside offensive line and maybe tight end, I'm not sure where that fit would be, unless you wanted to upgrade, get a veteran linebacker to step in for Mack Wilson, but I think he's been okay. It just feels like it's O-line or bust, and John Dorsey said it. There's not a whole lot of offensive linemen out there to go get.
We also haven't seen a whole lot of the two guys he traded for prior to the beginning of the season, and I know that dominated some of the conversation because I think a lot of people believe that we'd see those guys at some point, but bottom line is we haven't seen a whole lot of them. Do you anticipate any immediate changes to the offensive line?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. We were out there Monday, right? So you try to read the tea leaves. I'm sure I've said this before on here, but we're only out there once training camp ends for maybe 25 minutes, a half hour. So it's all individual drills and stretching, but you try to glean something. So I'm watching the offensive line, and I see Justin, it looks like Justin McCray's lining up at left tackle a little bit. Okay, that's newsworthy. But then we talked to him, and he goes, yeah, but I do that all the time, and I also lined up at center, right tackle, guard. So he did all of it, according to him, and that's what Freddie Kitchens said too. And then we watched one snap, there was one or two snaps, where they didn't have a left tackle. The four other guys ran, it's not a play because it's just the O-line, but they ran whatever blocking scheme without a left tackle. And to me, that was just showing us that they weren't going to show us who was starting. They were going to show the reporters who the first team left tackle was. But then you talk to Freddie Kitchens. He said they haven't made up their mind at left tackle. Joe Batoni said the same thing. I think we're still trying to figure that out. So number one, I think that's scary. You don't know who your left tackle is 6 days before you face the Patriots, who have a historically good defense through 7 games. Number two, I think it means there's no automatic solution. Right? And we can have an argument whether Greg Robinson's the biggest problem, Chris Hubbard's the biggest problem, Eric Kush is the biggest problem, but it feels like the Browns aren't satisfied, particularly with Greg Robinson. Whether it's a work ethic, a focus, like those are kind of not those exact words, but that's when you talk to people around the team, players, assistant coaches, about Greg Robinson, you get those kind of terms, focus, attention to detail, those kind of things. So maybe he just hasn't given them what they want from a commitment standpoint, and therefore that's the piece they want to get rid of. And then the question is, do you make it Justin McCray, who's got a guard body, but do you let him play left tackle? Do you make it Kendall Lamb, who's more experienced at right tackle than left tackle? I don't think there's any easy fix. Trent Williams would be an easy fix. You slide him in there, he's a 7-time Pro Bowler. But it feels like the Browns aren't satisfied enough that they will make a move, and it feels like the move will be at left tackle, which is surprising that they're also not making a move at right guard. And maybe they will, maybe they'll surprise us. But you mentioned Wyatt Teller, Justin McCray felt like possible replacements for Eric Kush at right guard. And if you watch or see a site like Pro Football Focus that grades every snap of the lineman, Kush is not grading out well. And his offensive line coach said, well, he'll do good in the pass game, but not in the run game. So I thought that would be an easier fix. You slide in a Wyatt Teller, who John Dorsey traded for, and let's see if he can have an effect at right guard. But so far, and we haven't seen the official practice, they haven't practiced on Wednesday yet, but so far it feels like the move will come at left tackle, and I think that is somewhat surprising.
Speaking of surprising, did it surprise you at all that they traded Austin Corbett? Only because, they really kind of sold out on that guy pretty early. I think they put their chips in the center of the table with him, and he did nothing to move the meter, didn't win the starting job. But having said all that, sometimes it takes guys like that a little bit longer to develop. Were you surprised at all to see them deal him?
I was. At the time, to me, the timing was surprising, right? You're admitting that you made a huge mistake with the number 33 pick in the draft. If he got drafted in May and he gets traded in October, 17 months later, they acknowledge, John Dorsey acknowledged that it's a terrible pick. So that surprises me. You settle for a fifth-round pick in 2021. There's no way to sugarcoat this, right? It was a bad pick. John Dorsey admitted it. He didn't get nearly the return you'd expect to get. So I was surprised by the timing. And then you talk to guys like Joe Bitonio and J.C. Tretter. And sure, they're friends with Austin Corbett, but they also know line play much better than I do. And they didn't feel like Corbett ever got the chance to really show what he could do. And obviously he practiced a ton and he played in the preseason. But he played a lot of the preseason at center. And, he never got to play in a game. I think he played 15 snaps over 2 seasons in a game. So, maybe it's a little premature to make this move when you haven't seen him actually play in a game. But obviously John Dorsey was fed up that Austin Corbett did not win the right guard job and just hadn't seen a reason to be excited about it and a reason to think that would ever change, I guess, right? It wasn't like next year you can put him in at center and you're going to feel completely confident if you let J.C. Tretter walk in free agency. There just wasn't that feeling within the organization, and that's why the move was made. I will say this, when you talk to some of the guys, maybe that switch from left side to right side, right? He was a left tackle for his whole career, I'm pretty sure his whole career at Nevada, and then you ask him to play right guard. Some guys struggle with that, and maybe if he slides back to left guard, which he wouldn't have done here because Joe Bitonio's here, and they didn't think he could play left tackle. But maybe with the Rams, if you put him in at left guard and let him practice there, maybe he is a competent player and can start in this league.
We'll get into the matchup here against the Patriots this coming Sunday. Based on what they did to the Jets on Monday night, I think that has a lot of people awfully concerned. And I think there are so many different positions that are going to be under the microscope for sure on Sunday. But you look at that offensive line, because it's so wildly unsettled and the Patriots can apply pressure at the right spots at the right time, you fear that Baker Mayfield might be on his back all day on Sunday. So we'll start there with this matchup against the Patriots. Is that offensive line, is that the unit that's really going to be under the microscope the most?
It's up there, especially when you watch what the Patriots did to the Jets. They brought all kinds of pressure, and the combination of the line and quarterback Sam Darnold couldn't figure it out, right? And it's always a combination. Do you have the right protection called? If they're bringing too many, do you pick the right 5 guys to block so you at least have a split second to throw the ball? And the Jets couldn't figure that out all night long. So, you have to watch out for that. And even if the Browns weren't making offensive line moves, you'd have to watch out for it because the line has been inconsistent. I do think it's interesting that any change that's going to be made, and obviously the bye is the reason, right? It's the perfect time to make a change. You get practices, extra practices between games. But I thought the Browns line played as well as it has all season against Seattle. Baker wasn't hit, wasn't sacked. Chubb ran for over 100 yards. So I just think the timing's a little interesting, but I understand if they make a move, why they would make a move, because the line has been inconsistent. Having said that, Bill Belichick's going to find the weak spot and try to exploit it, and it's up to the line and the coaching staff to minimize that kind of damage. And then it's up to Baker to get the hot reads. It's up to the receivers to adjust. The Patriots just put so much pressure on the unit as a collective to not make a mistake, right? I mean, they force you into mistakes, and this is going to come down to not making mistakes. And I'm just not sure there's much reason to feel confident that the Browns won't make those mistakes, given how they looked against the big-time line in San Francisco, and given Baker's 11 interceptions through 6 games.
Well, we'll get a little deeper into this matchup as well. Mohamed Sanu.
Yep.
Just recently became a member of the New England Patriots, and certainly I think they're expecting big things from him, maybe not right away. I think any time a receiver especially is dealt, he doesn't always get the opportunity to make an immediate impact. But this game takes place in 5 days, so it's creeping up on us for sure. Is there a realistic scenario where the Browns could potentially shock the world next week?
I think there is, and it's going to go back to the talent, right? I think if you go player for player, side of the ball, the Browns are either ahead or not far off, I think, from New England. I mean, I think defensively New England's got a big-time secondary, and they've got a bunch of playmakers, but you can make the same argument for the Browns. So, yeah, from a talent perspective, I think the Browns are on a relatively level playing field with the Patriots. And if you really believe that, which I do, then they have a chance to go win a game, right? You can pull an upset. If they play like they did against Baltimore, they could play with the Patriots. If they did play like they did at the first quarter plus 6 seconds against Seattle, they could go win a game. So, I don't think it's impossible. I understand that the point spread's double digits. At least that's the one I saw at the early line. New England's defense, like I mentioned, is playing historically well. And I saw some stat, and I think the margin of victory through 7 games is the highest except one team in like 1920. I mean, something insane how they're just dominating teams. So, obviously it's not going to be easy. I mentioned Baker. To me, the number one thing, you asked about the offensive line. To me, the number one thing is Baker cannot afford to turn the ball over against a Patriots team that has turned everyone over, right? I mean, Sam Darnold, 5 turnovers on Monday night, 4 picks and a fumble. Baker's got a league-high 11 interceptions. The Patriots have 18 interceptions as a team. It's twice as many as the next highest amount. Carolina's got 9. So if Baker turns the ball over, the Browns aren't going to win. If he doesn't turn the ball over and you can run Nick Chubb and you can keep the ball out of Tom Brady's hands and you can wear him down and you run some play action, or if you get the right look against a blitz and you hit Odell with the slant and he takes it 80 yards, those are the kinds of things that need to happen for this team to pull the upset. And so, yeah, I can come up with a scenario, but it starts with Baker not turning over. It includes Nick Chubb with a big day. It means Odell has some big plays. And then on the other side of the ball, you got to figure out a way to pressure Tom Brady. And the Patriots have some weaknesses across that line. The Browns' front four has not played to that dominant level we all expected. If it all comes together, yeah, I think the Browns can win. And then I think the Browns can go on a run. And I think a win in Foxborough would really get the wheels moving toward that kind of second-half run that we've been talking about. But that's a lot of ifs. And we haven't seen that team do that to this point. And when Freddie talks about talent's gotten us to 2-4, well, talent can get you to 2-5 because talent is not going to, on its own, beat New England with Tom Brady and with the greatest coach of all time in Bill Belichick.
One last thing on this game before we wrap up with our golf shot of the week here. I think Bill Belichick actually mentioned this morning. He felt like the Browns had a bit of an advantage and the Patriots were a little behind because they played last night and the Browns are coming off of a bye week. How much of that do you buy, and how much of that do you think actually factors into next Sunday's game?
Well, I think he believes it when he says that. I think as a coach and a longtime coach, you go, oh my gosh, you know, we talked to him at 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, or Tuesday, right? You say a.m., you don't need to say morning. So we talked to him 9 a.m. Tuesday. I mean, he was only 9 hours removed from the Jets game, right? And we're talking to him on the conference call, and he's already, you know, lamenting the fact that the Browns practiced last week. They practiced Monday. He said, we don't even have a game plan yet for the Browns. So I think those things are real. And I think one less day to recover is real. Oh, you know, and the Browns have had time to practice, and they've had an extra day to look ahead to the Patriots. Those are all things. But when you take a step back, would you rather have, and this is no slight on Freddie Kitchens, would you rather have Freddie Kitchens on extra time or Bill Belichick on short time? And the answer is Bill Belichick because he's won all these Super Bowls. And because I would argue he's the smartest coach in the history of football. So I don't think one less day is going to keep the Patriots from beating the Browns. I think maybe they slim down what they do as a team. Maybe they shorten the playbook. Maybe they practice less so guys' bodies recover, and that is a factor in the game. But any other team, I'd say yes. Short week, huge factor. Bill Belichick and the Patriots, I would say no.
Fair enough. Well, we've come to that point in the show where we have to pick out our golf shot of the week. Now, you told me you haven't been able to get out there and hit the links much recently. You've been working too much.
That's the story of my life, Andy. I've been working too much, and I'm staring out your window, and it's gorgeous outside, and I'm going, am I going to have time to hit some balls today, or do I have to go write some more about Odell? I've not. I thought about, maybe I'll take a trip down memory lane and give you a golf trip with some 4-iron I hit out of the woods in Pinehurst, North Carolina, but I can't do it. It's too painful not to have played the last couple weeks. So if you got one, I'm glad to hear it, but it's been a couple weeks and I have not played, and it just hurts.
You've got to take advantage of some of the sunshine and 60-degree weather we have coming up here, hopefully this weekend. They're talking about 60s and sunny on Saturday, maybe a little rain on Sunday. Hopefully that clears the way and you can get back out there at some point this weekend. But the difficult thing this time of the year is you're running out of daylight so early.
You're right. I know. I mean, even today, if I get out of here, I don't know. It's going to be tough, but obviously, I miss it. And we were talking to Odell at this bowling event, and he was talking about, all the sports he's played. And I got into golf a little bit because he went through a phase in the offseason where he was at the range hitting balls, and he's got a good-looking swing. And, he said, he goes, it's weird when you hit like 500 balls, muscles that don't hurt playing football start hurting. He goes, his AC joint was hurting. So he's going to take it back up either in the offseason or when he's done playing. But that just got me thinking about golf some more. So.
Yeah, see, now you've got the itch again. So
exactly.
Got to scratch that itch. Scott, always a pleasure. Look forward to doing this again next week.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Scott. Again, Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle, Telegram, the Medina Gazette, and, of course, BrownsZone.com. That'll wrap things up on today's edition of the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. For Scott Petrak, this is Andy Barch saying thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you all again next week. Catch you all again next week. Catch you all again next week. Catch you all again next week.